Hey, self-storage. Tommy here at Storage Pug. Welcome to an incredible episode of Gabfocus. Melissa, how in the world are ya? Y'all been traveling everywhere.
Yes, we are doing fantastic. Back in our own home. I slept in my own bed last night. Things are good.
I'm so happy for y'all. It's been a busy summer for everybody, but we've got I think, an incredible, phenomenal episode here. We're not going to talk about doors so much, but we are going to talk about data and reports. And we've got three, I think, of the best people to talk about this. Oftentimes, when it comes to data and analytics and reporting, all of that data is often siloed, right? The investors look at one piece, marketers look at one piece, operators look at another piece. And so we've got three really amazing people who can talk about all three of these things and remove the silos. So let's introduce our speakers today. So first, here on my left, I've got Alyssa Quill, the CEO of Storage Asset Management. Alyssa, how in the world you been?
Great. Doing well. Thank you. Happy to be here today. Nice to meet everybody. And looking forward to talking about this.
No, I'm so happy to have you here. So just for in case the audience doesn't know who you are and what Storage Asset Management is about, give us the 30-second rundown on what you guys are all about.
Yes, I'm the CEO of Storage Asset Management. We just say SAM. It's faster, easier. But we manage storage properties for other investors. So we manage about 580 self-storage locations around the country now. Our company's 13 years old, and so we've grown a lot over that period of time. We've made a ton of mistakes. We've learned a lot, and been able to add a lot of really smart people and systems to our team that we've learned from too. So I've been in storage for 22 years. I've always, all but 1 year of that, I worked for very large organizations for Storage USA and then Extra Space, and I've had roles in finance departments, revenue management, and operations before we started SAM.
So you can speak to a lot of all of these things.
Yeah.
So super excited to learn from you, and thank you for spending your afternoon with us.
Thanks for having me.
Right on. And then to Alyssa's left is Cherolyn over at the Jenkins organization out of Houston. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you.
Thanks for spending your time with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm so flattered.
Yeah.
As you said, my name is Cherolyn. I am with the Jenkins organization. We go under the brand name Premium Spaces, and we own and manage 43 self-storage facilities across Texas, Nebraska, South Carolina, and I'm the director of marketing, so responsible for all things marketing. And I've been with the Jenkins organization for about 2 years, but in marketing for about 18 years total.
So you're used to looking at data and spreadsheets and making heads and tails of those things.
Yes, I thought you invited me because I'm a Google Sheet nerd.
That's exactly why you're here. Awesome. Well, Cherolyn, thanks for spending your time with us this afternoon. I'm excited to get your take on especially the marketing spin on data and reporting. And then, of course, your compadre, Mr. Jeremy Rolwitz. Welcome to the party. Welcome back to Gabfocus, actually. Glad to have you here today, man.
Welcome. Yeah, I'm flattered to be here. It's obviously my pleasure to be here and then try to add some value to this conversation we're going to have around data and reporting. I'm excited to do so. I'm an operations guy. I've been with the Jenkins organization for almost 9 years, and the industry for about 17. So looking forward to kind of digging deep into this.
We're glad to have you back, man. Excited to get your take on the operations side as well. So should be a blast. If this is your very first time to Gabfocus, honestly, you picked a really good episode with some really incredible people. This show is brought to you by our teams at Storage Pug here in Knoxville and Lighthouse Storage Solutions right outside of Chattanooga. Of course, Gabfocus is set up this way. We got 60 minutes. It's a live Q&A. Melissa and I are going to take turns asking all the questions, and our guests are going to take turn answering the questions. And of course, we advise and encourage you to use the Q&A option in your Zoom app. Click on Q&A, ask your questions there, and we're going to insert it as we go through. So today's agenda looks like this. We're going to talk about data and reports. We're going to talk about how can we turn that data into actions. We're going to talk about how you measure success. We're going to talk about what data lives outside of your organization and what you can bring in to complement what you're doing inside your business. And then we're going to jump into question of the week. So Melissa, my speakers, are y'all ready to rock and roll?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Melissa, kick us off.
Okay, our goal, guys, is to finish this entire thing because we cannot fit another spinoff session in this year. So let's do this. Data and reports. What are the different types of data, of facility data, that you should be tracking? Who wants to tackle it?
So,
I mean, I could, oh, go ahead, Jeremy, you start.
So just to start off, I mean, really, first and foremost, I think customer satisfaction, being able to dial in what your customers are saying about you, so we can make improvements at a facility level to drive those footsteps. Also, you really want to dial into the market conditions, because that's going to say, and that's going to provide a lot of information on next steps that you're going to take regarding that data. So that would be my 2 cents on kind of 2 of the most important things that I would track initially, and then we can kind of back into, why.
Some that I would add, there are, of course, key statistics like key KPIs like occupancy and move-ins and move-outs that we're all looking at all the time, and they're in our face all the time. But one of the, I think, one of the most important metrics or levers or sets of data that we have that can predict how well we'll do in the future is our lead funnel. So how many leads are we getting in, and then what's happening once we get those leads? Are we converting them into rentals? So I think that is a really important facility actionable data that we try to focus on.
I love that. And then to follow up on basically what Alyssa's saying is the next step, I feel like in my role is, okay, once we've turned those leads into conversions, then I like to measure how much are we paying for those rentals? How much is it costing us to acquire those leads? Does it make sense for this facility or not? And do we need to start pulling any levers and triggers, or I guess levers, to modify our campaigns and improve them to improve those efficiencies?
That's killer. So what tools or platforms would y'all recommend for tracking and reviewing all this data?
I already said I'm a Google Sheet nerd. So all of my stuff, as Tommy is well aware, because I'm tagging him in the middle of the night, what about this? I take everything he sends me, I put it into a Google Sheet, and then I want to be able to see it over a year. And then I want to be able to look at it year over year. And so I've got a spreadsheet that has 5 different tabs on it that tracks metrics that are important to me.
Alyssa, at scale with Sam, how are y'all tracking?
Yeah, that's what like it depends on the size of your organization, I think, right? So for most, Excel or Google Sheets is perfect. And you can keep a database, hold the history, bring in the new information, look at trends, and keep track of things in that. But as you get larger, that gets tougher. But there is some I can share more later on our systems. But so we dump all of our data from all sorts of sources into one big SQL database, and then we have tools on top of it where we can have dashboards with pull random queries of data and dump a study of information into Excel to analyze it and things like that. But there's a lot for most storage operators. Most of the data is already at your fingertips anyway, and you don't even need to do it. So you can use Google Analytics to see how what's happening and how many web hits am I getting, what's going on. You can use your POS software to show what's changing in activity over the last 14 months or 36 months or things like that. So most of the data is pretty easy to access in our industry, I think. You just have to know what to look for and know what you want to save and hold on to watch trends.
Yeah, like a facility overview sheet that you export right out of your online software.
Yeah, and most these days have that the ability, the month over month, the year over year comparisons, the move-in revenue, move-out revenue, just important things to track for sure. Most management softwares have that at your fingertips, like Alyssa said.
Oh, Melissa, you're muted.
Do that. I didn't even realize I did it. Okay. So let's talk about specific reports, because as lots of these softwares, they have a ton of different report options, and it can be really overwhelming to the manager or owner operator even that's never really looked beyond their management summary. So what are some of the reports that you guys consider to be the most important? And then alternatively, what are some of the least important that you very seldom even glance at?
So I'll speak real quick. So the management summary, occupancy statistics report, the management history, those are probably my top three off the bat. And then obviously your existing rent increases and your customer thresholds. Those are something I'll look at as well, just when it comes to driving revenue and making sure that we're hitting the customers as needed regarding customer increases. And I'll tell you, I know it's a lot more common in the industry, but just dynamic pricing, we use a platform called ProRise, which just the data and the reports that we're able to pull from that alone really gives us a pulse on trends, the market, existing increases, and it really lays it in a way where the graphs and the way that the data is put to you on the dashboard is extremely easy for you to see and for your team to understand when you're putting it out to them.
I mean, I agree completely. So if I only had 5 minutes and wanted to just look at something quick to see how a property's performing, I would look at a management history report, something that shows at least 13 months of data so that I can see year over year. If it shows 36 months, it's even better. And then I'd look at a profit and loss statement, an income statement for the property. Is it cash flowing, or, is it ever going to cash flow? If it's not, how are the expenses, or is there anything crazy going on there? So I'd say those would be my top two if I only had a few minutes. Least important is a tough question, Melissa, because
No.
if it's so important I don't look at it, I don't even know what it's called. I would say there are probably some in operating software programs that are like very specific, like receipt details for every transaction that happened. That's important, probably more for like a property accountant to reconcile and make sure everything's there, but and that's not giving me data that will help me make decisions for how I'm going to change the trajectory of the property in the future. So I'd spend less time on those.
Right. Okay.
Cherolyn, from the marketing side, what are the reports that you care most about?
From a marketing perspective, I'm looking at, we run a lot of paid search campaigns through Google. So monthly, Tommy will send me our reporting metrics sheet, and then I take that, I put his information into my information, analyze it, and I'm looking at occupancy from our own facility overview sheet. I'm looking at cost per conversion. I'm looking at how many rentals did we get and things like that. Also managing frequently, often, it's not a report, but we have a listings management software. And so making sure that all of our listings are locked and have all the right information and the best photos. And we have a reputation management software. So making sure that we're acquiring those reviews on various platforms, mostly Google, making sure that we're responding to those on at least a daily basis, or at least a weekly basis, if not daily basis. If I'm seeing high cost per rentals, metrics that are alarming me, then I'm taking a deeper dive in. I'm looking at where we're ranking organically through free platforms like an SEMrush. I'm asking Tommy, because we have access to the analytics, and I can look at it too, but really getting Tommy's team to look and dive into the analytics. Are we getting enough traffic to the site? Where are we missing this opportunity?
I think
those are off the top of my head.
Those are cool. So so it's like a collection of like the top 3 or 4 operational reports. Yeah, top 3 or 4 from the marketing, and then Alyssa, you mentioned the 2. I think combination of those, you should have a really like 360 view of how well this property is doing, right? So let's talk about turning all this data. So you've gathered all these data from all these reports. Some of it's in a spreadsheet, some of it's in a PDF, however you're looking at it. Let's talk about how we turn this data into action. So the first question I have is because we have different like specialists on the call, right? Marketing, operations, investing, executive. So like, how do you present this information to your team or beyond your team, like other outside investors? Like, talk about how do you what kind of data, and then how do you actually present this information to other people to help them make, heads and tails and make use of this data?
I'll start.
So go ahead.
I'll start. So, the things I care about most at the end of the day, and like everyone said, it's all important, but at the end of the day, I care about, like I've said a million times, cost per rental. How many rentals did we get, and what's our occupancy? And so I take that data, I put it into a spreadsheet. I don't glamorize it. It's just, it is what it is. I look at a rolling 3-month, look back at that and let our investors or let our teammates know this is where we are. And one thing I want to really point out is, don't be alarmed if something's off 1 month, because you're going to have ebbs, you're going to have flows. And so just because you had a super high cost per rental 1 month doesn't mean that it's going to be like that every month. So don't panic, don't freak out, stay the course and keep going, especially with like paid search, because you can just have some anomaly months. But if you really look at it over a 6-month, 12-month period of time, it's going to average out and things are probably going to be okay. If not, obviously there's room to make some adjustments, but definitely don't panic.
Good point. I would say, if I'm looking at a report or data or some presentation of data, there are really only 3 purposes. One is I'm trying to predict the future, like what's going to happen in the future. How much money am I going to need, or how much money am I going to get? How much, what volume? How many labor hours am I going to need? Things like that. Or I am trying to measure the past, which might be I developed an incentive plan for the team working at my store, and I want to measure how did they do last month so that I can pay them and keep them motivated. Or I have some decision I need to make. Should I change prices? Should I spend more on Google ads? Should I train? Should I change the training? Is there a piece we're not getting right? Things like that. So I think any time we're pulling data together and going to present it to somebody, it needs to be able to do one of those 3 things. So if I just put a number in front of somebody by itself, to most people that will mean nothing. So they need something to compare it to. So if I'm measuring performance in the past, comparing it to a budget or a target or a benchmark, if I'm trying to predict the future, how does that compare to where I'm at right now? Am I getting better? Am I getting worse? And if I'm trying to make decisions, again, you just need some sort of trend or comparison to last year, to the last month, because if like I have the world's worst memory. So if I just look at even a management summary, how's the property doing today? Okay, is that good for that property or is that bad? I don't know. I need to compare it to something to understand.
Yeah, I like that. What you said exactly, have a benchmark. So for me specifically, knowing how much my average customer lifetime value is key in order to make those decisions about whether or not we're on track or if we're way off track.
Very good point.
Okay, so that was actually the next question. You guys have already started to tiptoe into that. How do you identify the data trends? No, that's great. You did the segue for me. So what are the data that you're looking at, like on a weekly basis versus something you might check quarterly, or maybe it's a year over year, or is that kind of apply to all of it? And like, you see where I'm going with my question? Like, what do you prefer to look at on a weekly basis versus quarterly or yearly or that kind of thing? Who's going to take it?
I can. I mean, there are some things that every single day we're watching and looking at the trends, like move-in activity compared to a goal and revenue collected compared to a goal that we have for the month. There are things like Cherolyn mentioned that if you just look on them on a daily basis, you're going to just, you're going to give yourself heartburn because it's like going to look terrible one day and better the next day. And you just kind of slow down and look at that a little bit. Like if you change a price and then you're watching every day, did I have anybody move into those units at the new price? That takes a week. Like it's not gonna, you need a little bit of time to absorb that information. Looking at leads coming in, web hits, click-through rates. I don't think monthly is enough, because if I'm spending money online and I've got this Google ad and it's showing up and people are clicking on it, but I'm getting no conversions out of it. If I wait a month to make a change to that, I probably just threw away a lot of money. So there are definitely things you want to look at more often. But there are some that, if you're sending out rate increase letters once a month, maybe to your tenants, looking at their reaction to it on a daily basis isn't going to help you. You're not sending any more out for a month. So give it some time, look at it next month before you send them out, to if you want to change your strategy or something like that. And I'd say don't overanalyze sometimes.
Good point. Cherolyn, did you have anything from a marketing standpoint to add to that?
Let's see. I would say, I would agree. Like, I'm just going to sort of restate what I said before. Like, don't wait. Things I look at on a daily basis. Let's see. I'm always making sure that we're keeping that funnel full of our reviews, because that's how we're going to help ourselves rank organically. Always making sure that our listings are locked in and ready to go. And then I do sort of wait until the month is over to check my cost per rental. I just simply don't have the bandwidth to look at it every single day. And also I don't want to freak myself out but I will say, like Jeremy, it's why we work so well in tandem. Jeremy will come to me and say, hey, we're typically here by the middle of the month and we're not there as far as rentals and move-ins, and we're just not, the phone's not ringing. And so I think that's why it's so great to have other people that are really good at what they do inform you of things that you're not aware of. So things like that help me decide what my next step's going to be.
Yeah, we talked about that in the very beginning, how our information can be so siloed, and sometimes we forget that either what we are doing is impacting another area of the company. Yeah, so the good communication between those two, extremely important. Alyssa, you suggested this next question, I believe. What data do you use to make pricing decisions?
Yeah, this is interesting, and it changes, I think, with the time. So in last summer, it was, what's the most we can charge that somebody will move in, which I guess it kind of always is, actually. Like, maybe that's not that different. But it didn't really matter what our competitors were charging. But when demand's down a little bit, the competitive market matters a little bit more. So we're looking at some things. In many cases, we're looking at competitor rates, most of them. We are looking at a unit type and size level, how many vacant units do we have? How many days has it been since a move-in? So even if we have, if we have a lot of vacant units of a type, but people are actively moving in, then it's probably not a price issue, right? It's just we have too much and it's taking time and they'll get there. And we're comparing when our occupancy is higher on a unit type, we're comparing the average in-place rate, like on our rent roll, what people renting already are paying on a unit, to the current asking rate or the current move-in rate. So if you have like the dynamic pricing or value pricing, if we have our standard rate, but 45% of people are choosing to upgrade to a more expensive, better quality unit. So really understanding if 70% of tenants are choosing to upgrade, well, then probably our base rate's too low, right? So we can push that up a little bit more. If nobody's choosing to upgrade, probably our base rate's too high. So kind of just comparing all those different rates.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what Jeremy would add. Yeah.
Yeah. So luckily, with the dynamic pricing program that we have, it does a lot of the work for you, pulls in a lot of the historical data, it forecasts, and it really, it's quite interesting, the data that is created from that program. But really, just looking at pricing, what's going on in the market? Do you have any new competitors? What type unit is in demand? Unit types, is your property expanding. You know, you really want to kind of dial in and make sure when you're comparing your comps that you're apples to apples. You know, we're not going to be comparing oranges to apples because it really isn't fair at the end of the day. A Class C versus a Class A. You really want to know who your competition is and really how to weight your competition appropriately within the system, because that's gonna optimize the dynamic pricing. But really, you got to be in the forefront of what's happening in the market, and you may be in this 3 mile radius, but it's the 4 and 5 that's creating an indirect effect for you within that 3 mile radius. So it's really keeping your thumb on that. And as long as you are aware what's going on within your market and that indirect effect, I think you can really dial into the optimal price for that location, depending on availability, unit types, and sizes that I mentioned previously.
So the other thing I like about that system that Jeremy's talking about is it analyzes move outs and determines whether or not move outs occurred on people whose rent was increased, because I have been guilty of going to the team and being like, I'm seeing all these terrible reviews about they're mad at us because we increased their rate. And I think we need, I really feel like we need to calm it down. And then, the team will be like, simmer down. We only have,
Stay in your lane.
exactly. We only had X number of move outs, and they track it over a decent amount of time. It's not just 1 month. And they're like, actually, it only resulted in so many move outs. So it takes that sort of gut instinct, that inner turmoil that you might have, and does it all, computer learned, and you don't get your brain out.
Love it.
On those increases, we'll generally track 3 months after the increase to really determine, the loss of the increase. That's kind of the way we do it, and it's been a positive being able to track kind of our loss from increase. But I'll tell you, over the last several years, I mean, we've seen very little. I think right now there's a little bit more sensitivity price wise throughout the portfolio. But increases, I mean, we're still generating those through the company standard.
That's awesome. Well, we've touched a lot about operational data, so we can stay in this focus a little bit. So Alyssa, maybe this question for you with your, pulling in from your operational backgrounds. We've talked on the stuff that's important to track, like, move-ins, move-outs, occupancy, all of those things. What are some other operational data points that you think are incredible to be tracking and keeping a pulse on? And then more importantly, how do you share that information with the other teams that are, also in charge and are also responsible for keeping this thing going?
Good question. And it reminded me, I don't think we really answered one of the questions you asked earlier about how do you present it to different types of people, but close rates. I mean, I would say that is maybe even our most important metric that we look at. So we're spending money to get leads, we're for the phone to ring, for people to come to the website. And if we're not turning those leads into rentals, something's wrong. We got to figure out why and fix that, pull some other lever, or anyway, adjust training, or fix whatever it is that's causing that close rate to be off. So I would say that's really, really key, and understanding the change in the trends in close rate. And if the trend changes, was there a new competitor? Did a competitor drop rates? Did we get a new manager who needs more training? Is there an issue in our customer care center? Or is there this phone line just not working? Did something happen programmatically where all of a sudden things aren't getting forwarded the way that they should be? So there can be many things. Is a button on our website not working, right? So that's part of, that was the first part of your question. What was the second part?
How to communicate it.
Yeah, how do you get this in front of other people, like, marketing, or maybe the acquisitions team, or any of the other teams that are gonna, want to see this data?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many other key data points as well. So that's one of them. So we use a tool right now called Tableau that we can take the data from all different places. So our reputation management software, our Google data, our our data from the POS system that we use and our financial data, and put it all in one place. So in that system, we basically have dashboards depending on the viewer or the purpose. So there are marketing dashboards, there are some owner facing dashboards for our clients that own the properties we manage. There are revenue management team focused dashboards. And then there's just general overall operations that, these are the key statistics that everyone in our company knows all the time. So they're on a monthly basis, our senior leadership team is looking at, okay, what's trending? How are our, we use same store or mature properties. So ones that weren't in lease up last year and we had them and they're not in lease up this year. So it's really easy. It's fair to compare how they're doing this year to last year, to really, really track our trends and performance and where we're headed. So we do that in Tableau just because we have a lot of properties and a lot of data and it's a little much for Excel. But I think you could very easily do the same thing in Excel. Like you could dump the data from your operating software into a spreadsheet, and dump it from Google or your website insights into another spreadsheet and then just manipulate it and put some pretty graphs together.
But it sounds like you're actually consciously pushing the operational stuff and the marketing and the financial, and you're putting it all together so that when you're sending it out to your team, they have a full picture and not just here's our marketing report, because how does that
at a
measure
high
up to
level?
everything else?
So we're putting high level data for all that stuff together and sharing it with
Mhm.
everyone, but then each team can drill down further
Okay.
into
I
more
like
detail.
that. I like that.
Hmm.
So on a smaller scale, then how are you guys doing it at Jenkins?
I think first and foremost, when talking about the data, don't overcomplicate it. Try to streamline the data. We do that with not only our team, but our investors as well. And know about what you're talking about. Know the data that you're talking about and adjust accordingly. For like the district managers, when it comes to the owners, we do a monthly report that really dials into the key components that the owners are looking for on a month-to-month basis. And then when it comes to kind of a group setting at the office and talking about the data and the adjustments that we may or may not make, depending on the results, I mean, those are laid out. They're simplified. I mean, it may be graphs or, an Excel spreadsheet. We may upload a report from SiteLink or a couple of reports to have comparable data side by side. But we really try to simplify it and not overcomplicate. We find that just to be able to absorb some of the information, especially the information. I mean, we could go on for days talking about it, but just to absorb, we'd rather them drink out of a water fountain instead of a fire hose.
I love that. So who, I guess, piggybacking on, like, who is in charge of the summarized data, right? Like, do you have someone on your team? Is it you? Like, how do you all go about like summarizing this data so that you're not giving them all the details all at once?
So it's a collaborated effort. Really, if it's operational, myself and Dwight will put together some data for the team in advance. Cherolyn does a great job of gathering her data, especially on some of these investor calls and whatnot that we have that are some key components that they like to hear. I mean, Cherolyn, I'm sure you can touch on that a little bit too.
Yeah. So Alyssa said earlier, it's like you can give them data, but without context. So we have, for our investors specifically, we share the results of their paid search campaigns. And, if you see a number like, a $268 cost per rental, you might think, wow, that seems a little high. And then when I say, oh, well, your average customer lifetime value is this, and in correlation to that number, then I'm not feeling as concerned. Are we going to still optimize, get it lower? Yes, absolutely. So yeah, giving them just enough information, a little context, and kind of helping like understand how your mind works and what you're doing behind the scenes to make it better. That's, in a nutshell, is what an investor I have found wants to know.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Lucas asked a question while we're kind of around this topic. Lucas, is there a realistic close rate to aim for or an industry standard that we can compare our rates to? Thank you. So Alyssa, y'all the one tracking it. And I imagine it's all over the map depending on, there's so many factors, right? It's a kind of a loaded question, but what can you tell Lucas to help him benchmark himself compared to what the national averages might be?
So this is not a data point that everybody tends to share. Nationally, like the REITs don't share this in their earnings calls. So it's a tricky one to have like a national benchmark, I think. Sam, at least, we tend to focus on our close rates on leads that are generated either through our CCC or call center or through the web, not necessarily walk-ins or phone calls that our managers at the stores answer. And the reason for that is we are 100% sure that all of the leads that come in through our call center or come in through the website get entered into our POS software. We're not 100% sure that all the ones that walk in do, but we want, and our managers are bonus based on close rates. And I don't want to discourage them from entering those leads into the software because we can manage them much better if they get entered. So we mostly measure based on just web and call center leads. And I will tell you, historically, our close rate on web and call center leads in years past was probably somewhere, when you merge the two together, around 50%. We created our own internal call center this year, and it's like this month it's 74%. So that team's done just an absolutely phenomenal job. They're turning, when people call, instead of a reservation or setting up an appointment for them to get a tour, they're just renting the unit over the phone. Wow. and via email and, e-sign. So the benchmark we used to have, we have blown past. So I don't know I don't know what our benchmark should be now. But I'm super proud of our team for that improvement.
I love that. That's so cool. Yeah. Congrats on the call center team. I think it goes to show, like, when you have people who are trained on your brand specific, not every organization can do this, but if you can, it goes to show how impactful it can be for people that are representing your brand, work and get paid by your brand.
Yeah, it does show that, but it also shows when you have a team, store managers at self-storage properties wear a lot of hats. And so they can be great at sales and great at lead follow-up, but at the same time, they've got somebody, they've got an auction going on and they have someone whose door is broken and they're running around. So they can't always follow up immediately. So to have a team of people that are focused really only on one thing there to assist them and help them with that piece while they're preoccupied with other things is really helpful, I think.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's really cool. So on this topic, there is a report that I'd love to share because I see a lot of names in this audience, and a lot of these folks I've talked specifically about this report to. Cherolyn, you're one of those folks. Is in your software, there's mostly most of the softwares have a report, something similar called a lead funnel report, that gives you a breakdown of every lead that was entered, and then the statuses of all of those leads. So have you even talked to this person? Have they just expired, right? Or have they actually converted and moved into a unit? And so that is a very quick, easy place to start for all those who haven't tracked this historically. If you want to just get started, you can just run that lead funnel report and kind of see for yourself, hey, these are where all my leads are coming from, and this is the percentage that actually moved in. So that's at least a starting point for all the folks in the audience who haven't been tracking this, granularly historically. So Alyssa, thanks for the tip and sharing that with the crowd here. Yeah. So
what question are we on?
I know. We actually, Candace, another good question that just popped in the Q&A. So for operators, this is actually kind of cool. For operators and honestly for anyone, for marketing too, what are some quick good data points and some bad data points that you see? Are there immediate red flags that you're like, wait a minute, something's wrong here? If you see a data point, maybe Cherolyn, maybe you can start, because I think something you said a couple times is the cost per lead, right? If you see a number that's like sky high, that's if not a red flag, at least an orange or yellow flag. But what are some other aha moments that make you cringe a little bit if you see things out of line?
I don't don't know that I see this from like anyone in our industry, but if someone's if someone's like pitching you and they're like, I can get you this many impressions, I don't look at impressions. I don't care about, like, it's great. I want to get impressions on my campaigns. But at the end of the day, right, I only care about conversions or conversions that are more like leads. And so I'm not as interested in my impressions, my clicks, my click-through rate, specifically when looking at a paid social or paid search campaign. So that would be my 2 cents.
That's good, because you're right. Lots of times those statistics are what are thrown out to get people to, pay for the latest marketing thing. So, Jeremy, Alyssa, you guys have anything to add to that?
When it comes to revenue and income, I think those are just extremely important data points, especially like your move-in revenue, tracking it monthly, yearly, including your late fees and your ancillary services if you offer those at your property. That's important to track as well. For us, we have a service called Storage Defender, which adds some value and some additional revenue to our properties, and that's something I definitely track on a monthly basis, if not closer to a weekly basis on our progress.
One other metric that's a quick red flag is if you look at your past dues, accounts receivable. So we use the main way we look at it is the dollars receivable more than 30 days past due divided by our actual occupied rent, so our rent roll at the time. And we have a benchmark of 3.5% is our goal. So if I'm quickly looking at a report and I see a 7% ARs, that's a red flag. Something's happened in our process at that property that needs to be addressed, or there's a bankrupt tenant maybe or something like that, but it's worth digging into. And then some of the others we haven't really mentioned yet that could be quick, easy training levers to pull would be what percent of your tenants are insured or with a protection plan or tenant insurance. What percent of your tenants are on auto pay? So these are things that you can look at and easily change the trajectory for the future of your property and its revenue.
So funny, everyone. It's like, this is the most important, and then we're like, wait, no, this is the most important.
They're all important. That's the problem, right?
There is so much data, and you can really get bogged down. But sort of kind of keeping it somewhat high level, I think helps.
Right.
So there's one metric that other people will totally disagree with me, but there is one metric in our industry that I totally do not like, I can make it be anything you want, and that's economic occupancy. So I hear a lot of people talk about, if your economic occupancy is really high, then your pricing's off, or it's really low, then, you have to do something. But that's like, if you manage to a target for economic occupancy, all you have to do is change your street rates, and then that changes. So it's like not a real, I don't think it's a real measure of success at a property. It's just a measure of where your rates are today, and they might be your street rates are today. So that I would say is my least favorite metric.
We got a least favorite out of you. Awesome. There you go. All right. So while we're talking about all the financial side here, how can you use financial reports to drive new strategies? And Alyssa, I'm going to just send this one to you. So we're talking about balance sheet, cash flow statements, accounts receivable, revenue by customer. How are you using those things to drive strategy?
I mean, in real life, cash flow statement is pretty important, especially in a lease-up property. Maybe it's a property that was a conversion, so an old warehouse building that somebody purchased, they converted it to storage. Doesn't really look like storage. It's in the back of an industrial park. It's leasing up slow. And really, we need to spend more in marketing to get people there, because they don't know it's storage. We need to probably put false doors outside or improve the signage, but those things cost money. So as a third-party management company, it's not our money that we're spending. So really understanding and being good at predicting the cash flow. what's happened in the past and then what do we expect in the future makes it a lot easier to get approval to spend someone else's money to do those things. So I would say of the things you mentioned, that's probably the most critical. And then the revenue by customer, Cherolyn keeps talking about, like the lifetime value of a customer is really important to know. And is that getting better? Is it getting worse? Because the dollars we're willing to spend to get a new customer or to keep an old customer, if we have to do something to keep an old customer, are a function of that.
And I would say check that number fairly frequently, at least once or twice a year, or at least twice a year, because it actually does change more frequently than you would think.
That's cool. I was just looking we were looking at move outs. And so we looked at all the people who moved out in 2001, 2002, and 2003. And so the length of stay just of the move outs. So it's a lower number because the people staying will stay longer than that. They're still here though. And it's dramatically improved over those 3 years. So gosh, do I have it? I might have it right here. Hang on. So I get it right. Yeah, so it was in 2021 the median, like I say, of move outs was 6 months, and it was 8 months in 2022, and it's a little over 8 months so far this year. So understanding that is pretty neat. Now it might have been in 2021, I'm way off topic, sorry. In 2021 it may have been just because everybody was moving. And so movers
A lot of
rent
shuffling happening
for a shorter length of stay, right? Now people are renting for a different purpose. And therefore more of them are renting for a different purpose, and therefore they have a longer length of stay. So I'm willing to pay more to get them than I was for those shorter length of stay renters in 2021.
That's interesting. No, I think that's a good data point to talk about. Like Cherolyn, like the fact that it changes and it's Sam's tracking it over the last 3 years. It's a huge, pretty decent change, man. That's a 33% improvement. So yeah, that should change how you're marketing and where you're spending dollars. To this point, Jim Ferguson, hello Jim. He asked a posted question earlier. So how do operators qualify the average length of stay per tenant? So like, what is the measure? How do you guys measure that? And is it different for you, Sam versus Jenkins? Would love to kind of hear that.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
Sure. So we typically look at that median length of stay for our tenants that are in place. So you get rid of the outlier that's been here 5 years because they're wonderful, but they're not as frequent, and I don't want to make my spending decisions now based on that. So we take the median length of stay at a property and the average monthly rent at that property. And then if it's a property where we maybe offer 1 month free, we'll subtract a free month. And then that's where we get our average value of a customer there. Or you could just pull it straight out of the software, but the software includes those outliers that have been here a really long time. So it's accurate, but we tend to make decisions based on a little bit more conservative number.
No, that's a cool data. Before we hear from Jeremy and Cherolyn, I think that's a cool thought of like removing the extra data points that, of course, anyone can tell any story with statistics, but the fact that you intentionally remove data points that are outliers so that you can have that actually is a better representation of where your dollars go. I think that's a cool point that people shouldn't be afraid to do. And to admit that, yeah, these are cool. We love the people who've been here for 8 years, but they're not representative of the people who are clicking on our ads. So we shouldn't, spend $800 to get that customer. So I love that you said that. So I think that's cool. But same question to Cherolyn and Jeremy. How do you all calculate length of stay and lifetime value over at Jenkins?
So totally opposite of Alyssa, I use the software. So I told her to go first because you never know, you might get another one of those outliers, right? So we're gonna factor them all in.
I love that.
Let the software do the work for you.
Jeremy, do you do anything different, or do you run?
Yeah, I mean, I
reports?
really rely on Cherolyn for that. If we really want to dial into it, we can subtract the outliers and really drill down to the specific property and length of stay if need be.
Yeah.
And the Jenkins organization, I'm sure Sam, all owner operator or all management companies do this, but we do such a great job of training our property managers that they could literally turn someone from, and I never knew this, being new to the industry, this is just a phenomenon for me, but they can really make or break a property and get these people to stay longer than I've visited the stores and I've seen these people actually come in and talk and have conversations with our property managers. Like they're BFFs or something. So you never know, you could get lots of outliers.
It's the customer experience. I mean, it really is.
Yeah. No, there's a cool brand that's in the audience today. We've measured we've been working with them for 4 or 5 years, and we measure their performance store over store, and some of their stores have had staffing issues. Some of their stores have gone kind of hybrid or remote managed, and store over store, the ones that have really excellent managers have done better financially. And again, it's not an indictment or a statement on remote versus manned facilities. But it is interesting to see, and they have a portfolio of 40 something stores now, 60 stores now. And so it's not just a small sample size anymore. It's like, this is 60 properties, and the top 50% all have a few things in common. And one of those things is they have excellent staff who take care of the property and treat it like their own. So there's something to be said about that. So Cherolyn, you have a good point.
That's music to my ears, because anytime I hear any rumblings of we should go hybrid or we should have an unmanned store, I'm like, no, that makes me want to cry. That's our differentiator, right?
Yeah, it's your unique thing. That's your value prop. It's what makes you apart.
We're all peddling the same thing. What are you going to do to set yourself apart? So
yeah. Sam, does Sam have a take on this?
We manage both remote managed stores, virtually managed stores, and most of our stores are staffed though. And it just depends on the size of the property, the competitors, the location, what makes the most financial sense. But I had one of my first jobs, I worked there for a long time in self-storage. My boss, at one point, his name was Carl Haas. He ran operations for Storage USA and Extra Space for a long time. And he gave, probably 20 years ago, I got this from him, and it has come with me everywhere I've gone since. But we're talking about data and reports, and sometimes a property's performing phenomenally or not performing well, and the data doesn't explain it. Right. So you think you can find the answer in the data, but you're like, I don't understand. Like this data makes no sense. Property's not performing well. So he gave us these signs that still sits here. Like literally, I've had this for 20 years from Carl, that's the answer at the end of the day. It's all the other stuff can be great, but if you don't have a great manager, it doesn't all add up.
I love it so much.
I need one of those signs.
I'll send you one, Jeremy. I'll get you one.
That's so awesome.
You're absolutely right, though. I mean, it's amazing. Don't get me wrong, we've got a lot of good managers out there, but it's amazing what changing the dynamic of changing out the manager, what it does to your property. If you see, you've been struggling. So I couldn't agree more on that.
Yeah, no, that's killer. So Melissa, I say we do this. Let's talk about measuring success real quick.
Yes.
And then we got some really good questions in the Q&A, and I say we answer the Q&A. Melissa, does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about measuring success. And I think we can kind of summarize this. And it's like, how do you gauge the success of your strategies? I know it's a broad question, but I kind of love to hear an operations, a financials, and a marketing take. So let's just start there. So how do you gauge and measure the success of your various different strategies?
So first and foremost, I track it with the budget. I look at the budget that was created prior to that year. And first and foremost, I track our progress to that budget. Obviously, it'd be nice to exceed that forward movement, growth, whether it be, and sometimes it's okay to lose a little occupancy to be able to gain some rate. And so knowing what you're looking at I think is going to be key, but really just gauging that from the data from your budget, and then having some forward progress.
Yeah, I mean, some changes you just make, like it feels like we need to make this and you're just going to make it, and it's small, it's one property, and just kind of see what happens. Others, if we're making some changes or trying something new or a strategy in a little bit of a bigger way, or we think it might be big and we want to do it later, we try to, before we make the change, have a plan for how we're going to measure if it worked or not. So if we're going to change our landing page of our website, we're going to do that for maybe half our location or a third of our locations. And then in similar markets, we're not going to change it for the other third. And we're going to see, how does like the movement activity at group A compared to group B, if we chart it, it looks like this, and then we made the change, and now the lines look different, like the slopes change. So thinking about a way to really measure the impact before we implement is something that we really try to do. And so, we started this new discount plan, did our click-through rates on our website improve? We got the same number of impressions or unique views, but now we have more people clicking through or converting, things like that can tell us, did it work or not?
And I'm going to sound like a broken record, guys, but at the end of the day, my job is to get us as many leads as possible at the most efficient cost possible. So is that, fixing things on my paid paid search campaign? Is that fixing things on the website? Are we missing opportunities on-site SEO? Are we missing opportunities on our Google My Business page? Making sure that I'm maximizing every single touch point that a consumer could have, and making that as seamless and easily flowed as possible, then and then all in the same time making sure that I'm helping the team reach those KPIs. That's my goal.
Yeah, and those touch points, it's not just a one and done. You got to check it. You got to make sure the customer experience, make sure everything works. Make sure your information is accurate. Make sure your Google Maps take you to the property, or your Apple Maps,
yes.
whatever the case may be. It's got to be able to take you to the property the way that you would journey to the property, or a customer would, not through the back alley and then down the driveway or whatever.
Yes. Circle the building 3 times. Yep.
And I can't stress enough, and that's something that our team does. Not only the managers, boots on the ground, but district managers. We're always checking the website. We're always checking the customer experience and making sure that those work. So
I love having a team that's
Great
like,
point.
this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that you guys talked about, especially what you said, Alyssa, about thinking before you make the change, how you're going to test it and measure it before it even happens. So that everybody has clear expectations of what the end goal is supposed to be and what it's supposed to look like when you get there. But with all of the testing and all the KPIs and all these things you're putting in place, how do you hold your team accountable to what that end result is or isn't?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the team and their goal. So if it's like our revenue management team, their goals are really to maximize the rent roll at our properties, right? So it's balancing, like Jeremy talked about, balancing. Sometimes you give occupancy to get rate. Sometimes it's just about, let's get occupancy. So each property has specific goals. Are we hitting those goals in each property? I think you have to have a budget. You have to have a plan. You have to have a target for everybody to shoot for. The marketing team should have targets for, hey, we're generating this many leads. We're keeping our cost per lead down below X dollars, and that target will shift, because I'll tell you that cost per lead or what you spent in 2021 is very different than what you're spending in 2023. But just having some sort of target to compare to.
I love that Jeremy, I think weekly, has a KPI tracking sheet that he and his property managers check it on a weekly. Is it weekly basis, Jeremy?
It's a weekly basis, and then we actually take a deeper dive on a monthly basis. And I'd rather be proactive than reactive operationally. And so that's really what we try to do with the KPI review. Just to make sure if we get a little off track, we can get in between the lines quickly and change course.
Yeah, like Alyssa said earlier, like you can't wait forever and then you already lost opportunities. So tracking it quickly and often. And it's like, it's, what is it, like 6 different data points that you look at and sit down with a manager. What can we do here? What do you think we should do here? Get some feedback. And I think they like having some skin in the game too. Or, Mhm.
That's killer. So y'all, let's shift gears and let's talk about some specific things here based on the conversation that we're having. Some of these are very short, sweet answers, but so Sheila asked, what call center are y'all using? So Alyssa, you mentioned Sam, y'all actually earlier this year, right, launched your own in-house call center situation.
Yep, we have our own. Before that, we used OpenText, and we had a great relationship with them for a long time. The difference, which I think now they can do, at the time they couldn't actually rent units for us. I think that's changed since we made a switch. But
yeah. Jeremy, what do y'all use over at Jenkins? Is it the same call center across all your stores, or?
I'm glad you asked. So this year we actually started our own call center. So we have a call center in-house. We have all of our own properties and a few more on it right now, doing some testing, making sure we're 100% comfortable prior to rolling out. From the OpenTech is currently who we use throughout the other portfolio. And we utilize a lot of their services, whether it be Express Collect, the Smart Eye, 24-hour monitoring. So we use a lot of different things with them, but the in-house call center will soon kind of encompass the all the properties.
Awesome. Melissa, who's up next here?
Oh gosh, we have so many. Okay. Let's see. Let's take James. Do you feel like there's been a shift in sizing preference, small versus large, over the last 18 months to 2 years, both in demand and length of stay? Are you guys seeing a trend one way or the other?
What's the data say?
so we did see in summer 2020, or fall 2020, summer 2021, our average size rented was larger than it was this summer, and even last year. And I think that was a combination of 2 things. One, we didn't have a lot of students renting because they were home, like school was remote, so we didn't rent some of those smaller units that we typically do in the summer. And then 2 was, again, people were moving and they were between houses, so they were putting a whole house of things in a storage unit. They weren't just using it for overflow. And now we're kind of back to normal. The size preferences we're seeing today are more like they were in 2018, 2019, for us, at least.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we're starting to see kind of that the average, not so much, 2021, 2022, but we're starting to see things like you mentioned, 2019. I would say, depending on the property and again, the market conditions, the home developments, different multifamily, I mean, that's really going to kind of change the dynamic of what the demand is at your property. But I'd say just kind of a blanket statement. I mean, Alyssa, you hit it dead on.
Awesome. So Jim's question's pretty good here too. So what are the new expectations for projections for an average lease up nowadays in terms of months or years? I know we had facilities in 2021 rent 500 units in 9 months. And some of those developers thought that would be the new normal, and 2023 looked a lot different, and they were surprised. So what are the new expectations moving forward, or at least over the next 36 months?
Again, I think similar to what Jeremy was saying, it really depends on the property and the market, and how is that market already oversupplied? Are there other competitors opening at the same time? But we are typically right now doing pro formas that are about a 3-year lease up. And we were very fortunate in 2021, early 2022 to be able to lease up properties, a year to 18 months faster than that in some cases. But in 22 years of me being in storage, that's the only time that's ever happened in a big way. So I don't think anybody should be performing that way.
Please don't do that. If you're in the audience and you're working on your napkin math to launch your new facility, your storage empire, don't look at the success stories of 2021 and think that that's replicable. Yeah, it's a once in a lifetime thing, probably. And it definitely, in Alyssa's case, once in a career thing.
It was fun. It was really fun while we did it.
Yes.
Yeah, so generally what we will do, 36 month on the pro formas, depending on the size of the property and again, which market it falls into. If it's a smaller property, we may shorten that lease up time. And again, 36 months, I mean, there's some additional things that you can bring to a property, like a packing and shipping, a postal operation, rental trucks, other avenues that would help kind of mitigate by bringing additional footsteps, mitigate that lease up time. But I think a fair amount would be a 36 month.
Okay.
Cherolyn, how are you when you're having investor meetings? Like, how are you helping them, reset expectations or quelling some of the heartburn and anxiety that they're feeling when they're at 42% when they thought that they might be at 80 at this time?
That's not my department. That's the district manager. But what I will say, if we're seeing positive growth month over month and we're making traction and they can see that we're making progress and we're basing our numbers off of unrealistic data from 21 or 22, then it's a little bit more palatable. It's when you are going in the wrong direction month over month over month is when it's really going to get bad. So that's my 2 cents.
So one other data point that helps explain what's happening in a market is in Google, you can pull, not necessarily for your store, but for a search term, what's the index of people searching for storage near me in Huntsville, Alabama, or whatever, pick a market. And you can pull that way back in history. So we very often we do it nationally, but then for some markets, what's that Google search index for the top storage search terms by month, and how does this year look compared to others? So you can show it was way up in those years, and it's not anymore. Here's how many people are searching now, and that's been helpful with investors.
Trying to help reset those expectations just a little bit. All right, Candace has a good question. How do you look at and use all the different rates, and how often do you change rates, and what tells you when to change them and how to change them? She says, please just simplify.
There's so many rates, right?
There are so many rates.
Push, tenant, standard, web.
Yes.
Yes. Help us understand, please.
Yeah, I mean, again, depending on the market, your rates can change on a daily basis. Is that a needed approach? Maybe not. But I think if we want to have our best foot forward and have the optimal rate at that time, we need to consider adjusting that rate on a daily basis, depending on the demand hitting your property and then other factors within the market.
I think if I just owned one property by myself and I was running it myself, so I didn't have access to the revenue management software that our groups have, I would probably look at my rates once a week, look at the move-in activity, maybe even every 2 weeks, honestly, street rates I'm talking about. Maybe every 2 weeks, because you need a little bit of time to see how the market absorbs it. And so I'd look at the lead activity that I'm getting, the close rates by unit type, and the move-in activity that I'm getting for whatever, my 10 by 10s. And if I got a bunch of leads and none of them are closing, I'd adjust my rate down. If I got a bunch of leads, they all rented immediately as soon as I talk to them, I might try to inch it up until it starts to slow down. And if I'm really, really slow, like it's just crickets, then I'd really be looking at my competitor rates and pull it out further. Like, can I pull people from further away if I dramatically dropped them instead of pushing them up?
And sometimes the key isn't just dropping rate. Maybe we're a little bit more creative with a concession or something we can offer the customer to kind of sweeten the pot. I don't want to create that knee-jerk reaction. Sometimes it's necessary, but other times I think we can just kind of sweeten the pot, add a little concession here and there, and still have them take action and still obtain that higher rate. So that's really what I look for as well, is how can we be creative here? The optics, how are the optics going to look to the customer?
Good point. And also, most of the software packages offer some sort of dynamic pricing built in. So you, like in SiteLink, for instance, you can build in push rates that automatically, like, hey, if I bump to this occupancy and stay there for a period of time, ask 5% higher. You just have to set it up. So if you spend 20 minutes setting those things up, the software will help you do that a little more frequently.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Cherolyn, from as you're dealing with like the marketing and the website stuff, like what are the different types of rates that you are overseeing? I know, of course you have your standard rates, but are you playing around with the other types of rates as well?
No, sir. I do not get involved in race at all, y'all. That's no.
She's like, I just make the phone ring.
Yes. I love
Stay in my lane.
Stay in your lane. Yes. As requested. I love that.
We will share reports, but that's it.
Yes. Y'all,
I
thanks
love
for an incredible, lively conversation about data and report. I mean, honestly, in the way you made data and reporting not boring and very, like, to me, very consumable. We've been taking notes over here, so thank you, y'all. Real quick, in case anyone wants to reach out to any of you, so Alyssa, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you to either learn about Sam or learn about you or how you can help their business?
Probably email. My email is aquill@storageasset.com.
Awesome. Easy. Cherolyn, same question to you.
I wish mine was so easy. It's Cherolyn, CHEROLYN at jenkinsorg.com.
jenkinsorg.com. Jeremy, same to you.
Yep, it is Jeremy, JEREMY at jenkinsorg.com.
Awesome. Y'all, thank you for being so kind and gracious with your time. Melissa and I always have a blast. It's like we have front row seats to like the best the industry has to offer once a month. So such a blast. Well, thank you for coming out. This episode, along with all the other episodes, are going to be available on the Gabfocus podcast and available on storagepug.com/resources. And if you're not already a part of the Gabfocus Facebook group, join it. It's the link right there. And of course, in October, we're doing a legal update. This is one of the most popular shows of the year. Because everyone's got, one thing about self-storage investors is they want to keep their investment. And the legal update is always going to be a blast. October 26th. It's going to be a fun one. We're going to do all the updates that have happened this year, all the trends, all the stuff that's been interesting. Like in Texas, there's been some legislation that's been brought to the table that may not be as fun for self-storage operators, and really not just in Texas but in other states as well. So we're actually going to bring on Joe Doherty from the SSA himself to come and talk about what the SSA has been doing this year and what they're looking to be doing in 2024 to help protect all of our self-storage people. But my lovely speakers, Melissa, thank you for coming today, and all of our guests.
Been another great one.
Another great episode, y'all. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.